So hello, I'm Joan Retman, Area Community Relations Director at the Gardens at Town Square, which is one of 8 premier retirement communities. All are local here on the east and west side surrounding Seattle and the greater Seattle area. All are also owned and operated by Era Living, a local company of 34 years at this time. Before we start today's presentation, I would like to share with you just a little bit more about Era Living Memory Care, which we offer in a secure home-like environment in 2 of our Era Living locations, Ida Culver House Broadview in Northwest Seattle and the Gardens at Town Square in downtown Bellevue. Both of these communities also offer independent living and assisted living on the same campuses. One fun fact, specifically about the Gardens at Town Square's memory care program, is that we've been a reliable, steadfast resource for almost 20 years now. And we know that although our memory care environment is certainly lovely with private apartments and its inviting courtyard just filled with flowers and greenery, what makes it truly special are the staff, including our life enrichment team member, who has been creating programs based on specific interests and backgrounds of our residents for the past 11 of those 20 years. Please ask us and we'll be happy to tell you more about Tina and all the special staff members of our community. Now, to create this personalized approach to memory care, both the Gardens at Town Square and Ida Culver House Broadview employ the Best Friends approach, which was developed by David Troxel and Virginia Bell. And that leads me to introduce our speaker for today's event. We are very honored to have David Troxel here with us to be presenting on when to make a move to memory care and how to do it. David Troxel has become internationally known for writing and teaching in the fields of Alzheimer's disease and long-term care. He has co-authored, along with Virginia Bell, 6 influential books and articles relating to dementia care, including his new book, The Best Friends Approach to Dementia Care, which I wanted to just make one additional comment on that. I had a family member who I shared that book with recently who felt it was the best resource that they had ever read on that topic. So thank you, David, for writing that and making that available to families. So at this time, we want to make sure you have plenty of time to share your information with us today, and I will now turn this over to you. Welcome, David.
Well, thank you very much, Joan. Before I start my formal presentation, I just want to say it's my honor to be with all of you. And I see a couple of familiar faces from maybe some past webinars I've done with Era Living. I live in Sacramento, California, but I have a great connection to the Pacific Northwest. I mentioned on a couple previous calls that I went to a small college called Whitman College in Walla Walla, Washington. I'm not sure I could get in today. It's probably much more exclusive today than it was back when I went there. But I had many friends from the Seattle area. I've been to your beautiful city many times, and it's always great to be with my Northwest folks here. So I'm going to jump into the presentation in just a moment. I will share with you that there's been a lot of breaking news over the last few weeks about this new medication, Aducanumab or Aducanumab. And if you want me to comment on that during the Q&A, I can comment about this controversy over this new drug. But meanwhile, I'll jump into my topic at hand, and hopefully all the technology gods will be on our side today. Okay, I hope you can all see my screen. I guess, Joan, speak up if you can't. And today I'm talking about a really interesting topic, I think, because we know that Alzheimer's disease and these other dementias tend to be slow, progressive illnesses. And so one thing I encourage families to take a look at wherever you are in your caregiving journey is to make plans, to plan ahead. You know, you don't want to have to make a decision in an emergency. We know this is a slow, progressive illness, I've said a moment ago, and care needs will advance. Now, some families are able to really develop a very good care plan and manage everything at home. But ones that I find are successful are ones that also dip their toes in community-based services like adult day centers, get some in-home help. And not everybody, of course, ends up in residential care, but many people do end up in residential memory care. So today I'll talk a bit about the dynamics of that, some of the benefits of that, and really how you make this decision, how you make this move. So thank you. I always appreciate being invited to do this by Era Living, who have formally embraced the Best Friends approach as their model of care. And I've always, Joan, enjoyed all the wonderful associates and staff members. You all have such a great heart for dementia care. So again, I think my bio was already covered, but I've worked in a variety of university settings, Alzheimer's Association settings. I was a family member to my mother, Dorothy, who actually lived in memory care in Sacramento for 3 years. She passed away in 2008. So I've not only been a writer and a supposed expert in the field, but I've also been a family member. I've been on both sides of the equation, particularly when it relates to residential memory care as well. So in this webinar today, we'll describe issues that can arise when the person with dementia lives alone or with family. I'll talk about some of the key factors in decision-making for families considering a move to memory care. When is the right time? And of course, I want to just openly recognize that, every family situation is different. Your resources may be different. You might have an extended family of 5 children deeply involved. All your children might be in Kansas or in Connecticut. So there's lots of different reasons for people to make memory care placements, but hopefully I'll give you a lot of good nuggets and ideas that can help you whatever situation you're in. Share ideas about how to make the move and communicate decisions to the person living with dementia. How do you raise a subject? What do you do if grandmother just will not leave her house? What are some of the ideas about really how to start this discussion about the need for care? The contemporary view of Alzheimer's is that people with dementia, Alzheimer's disease, these other dementias, in many ways, they're just like the rest of us. They have all the same needs, emotions, feelings, and most of us can be kind of prideful at times. We don't want someone to tell us what to do. We tend to resist suggestions that we don't think necessarily have merit. And of course, that's true for people with dementia, and made worse, of course, or complicated by the fact that they have such poor judgment, poor decision-making skills, et cetera. So we'll kind of cover a bit of that territory. And then finally, some of you I know may already have someone living maybe at Era Living or some other assisted living community in Seattle. I'm going to offer tips for successful visits, because I learned a lot, again, visiting my mother in memory care, about some do's and don'ts about how you kind of make these visits more successful. So again, as I said earlier, every family member experience is different, but common experiences include the emotional and financial and physical stress of caregiving. It's a tough job. It's a tough job. And sometimes you have a frail person caring for another frail person. We all know the difficulties of just even the emotional losses of dementia and, sadness. I was kind of reflecting with some friends the other day that even though my own mother, Dorothy, was kind of pleasantly confused, she was very joyful. My father and I were so lucky that she had this sort of really easy transition to memory care. There was still a lot of heartbreak there, when she would ask me for money and then said she needed a nickel, instead of $100, because she'd obviously gone way back into her childhood when maybe a nickel meant something. So again, lots of heartbreak, but we can, I think, also return to a place of satisfaction in the job we're doing as caregiving, and even some joy in the relationship. And of course, we know that gradually the person needs more and more care. So why do we sometimes need help? Well, certainly some of you might be physicians or nurses, but most of us don't have that medical training. And it can be very tough to deliver good health care, particularly if your family member lives by themselves. And, often when I do these webinars, a lot of people are on the webinar because, they have a husband, wife, or partner, or brother or sister, or mother-in-law or father-in-law who might even live with another family member. But it's also quite common for someone with dementia to be living by themselves. This can be a challenge because, let's start at the top, medication management. Even if you give one of those really nice medication pill box reminders, I think it can be very tough for people to stay on their routine. Usually they take the wrong amounts or don't take them at all, or you don't even know if they're even maybe flushing them down the toilet bowl. So medication management. Personal care, hygiene can certainly suffer and impact health. Urinary tract infections, dental issues, because the person living by themselves, often, even if they are trying to do some good work with their hygiene, it can become harder and harder. They also often lose that sense of self-awareness that maybe there's a body odor or that they haven't had a shower, they're forgetful. So personal care is another tremendous challenge. Nutrition and hydration become a concern. Weight loss. I'm not really sure I fully understand it. We know there are some dementias like frontal temporal dementia, where people do often develop these sort of cravings for, for sweet things and become very disinhibited. But I tell you, anytime I visit someone who lives by themselves, you open their refrigerator and it's usually kind of a disaster. Usually you see, ho-hos and cookies and candy bars and things, all things like that. Sometimes you see alcohol. So again, it's very hard for this person living by themselves to manage hydration. And just the other day, I was talking to a family member and they said that they found a lot of the Meals on Wheels that were delivered, like in mom's sock drawer, or in other places all around the house, which was also a huge challenge. Lack of movement, exercise. Again, if they're not getting out and about and doing things, that increases their wobbliness, that increases their fall risk. And of course, loneliness and isolation, which have been an enormous subject of attention during the pandemic, but it can be very hard to create this social atmosphere, obviously, if someone's living by themselves. Safety, and I think in so many ways, this socialization piece that I'll be talking about during this webinar and safety are two of the biggest, to me, indicators of why someone might need memory care. Safety, money management becomes a concern, financial abuse, fraud, inappropriate gifts or loans. This makes me so angry when I see elders victimized by all these scam artists. And of course, many elders do have some confusion, some memory loss. If they get a bogus charity claim that looks like a bill, they'll write a check and pay it. These bogus IRS phone calls. I may have mentioned this on another Era Living webinar, but a dear friend of mine in Sausalito, California, who was living by herself, had early Alzheimer's. She fell prey to one of these phone calls. You owe taxes. We're going to come and get you. We're going to impound your house. And she wired $10,000 to some bogus source. So again, that money was gone and really tragic. Memory loss and poor judgment can lead to accidents and safety concerns, the bathtub overflowing, the stove being left on, again, very tough. And of course, dangerous exit seeking in Seattle, just like in Sacramento recently, there was a lot of heat. And of course, if someone had left their house on one of those 105, 110 degrees days and wandered, that could have had some fairly catastrophic consequences. So again, these are all things to be concerned about. I think the dynamic is different when the person lives with family. Obviously, the safety factor goes up. I think it could be comforting, rewarding for families to provide this loving support. But over time, as I said earlier, the job gets tougher, burnout is common, exhaustion, loss of our own social connections, and fear of the future. With Alzheimer's disease and dementia, the average life expectancy is about 8 years, but that's a very funny number to play with and talk about because there are people who live with Alzheimer's for 20 years. There are people who seem to kind of crash through the various stages of Alzheimer's in 3 or 4. So it is tough because if you're a caregiver and you're trying to employ your financial resources, your own kind of game plan for your life, you don't always know how long this expectation will be on you. And that can be really very worrisome. Again, lack of sleep, very tough. And of course, the lack of social connections. One thing I've often done from the early days of my career, people in support groups will say, David, should I quit my job to care for my mother? Well, obviously, I don't have all the facts, but to me, a job is also being out in the community and socializing and being with others. And it always, I think, is really sad when the caregiver ends up really being as isolated as the person with dementia when perhaps they did have some different choices to still somehow be involved in community. If nothing else, for those of you who are family members, I encourage you to try to arrange some kind of respite during the week, or a neighbor or friend who could sit with your family member so you can go to Starbucks and visit with friends, take a walk, make some phone calls uninterrupted, and kind of keep that social connection going. The things that I think, again, to recap, that are really to me, the deal breakers, I think, for caring for someone at home: lack of sleep. For my own father, when we placed my mom in assisted living memory care, my mother was getting up at night. We actually had an in-home caregiver about 40 to 50 hours a week who was there during the day. But my father said, I don't want to have 24/7. That's sort of my tipping point. And when she began to wander and rummage and open drawers and do things during the night, he wasn't sleeping. And of course, that ended up to some very tough decisions. Personal care, continence care, certainly this can be a tough thing for families to do. We all do what we need to do. And, I'm not sad to admit that I guess I'm proud of the fact that I did a lot that care for my mom and dad and helped them in the bathroom and helped them in the shower. Things I never thought I could really do, you do, but still, nevertheless, it can be daunting. And sometimes the family member, it's odd in a way, but often they'll accept care from an in-home aide or a professional caregiver or a staff member, even more so than from a family member. Sometimes that kind of professional coat or uniform or kind of just impression sort of opens them up to accepting help. And of course, sometimes even the best caregivers become the bad guy. We can talk more about that in the discussion. I'm sure some of you have felt that way. But again, if your family member doesn't know that they really have dementia or really accept it or understand it fully, often they see you as the person who's taking away the car keys, cancel the credit cards, telling them what to do. And that can be very tough. And in my own writing about the best friends approach in the book I published, we talk a lot about trying very hard not to become the bad guy. Blame the doctor, blame someone else, use a sense of finesse to kind of not be so combative with the person with dementia. So with memory care, with assisted living, what I'm so pleased about is you now have a support team well-trained in dementia care. You have healthcare management monitoring that supports an optimal life. And of course, staff can now do some of the heavy lifting around personal care, which can free you up for a more social time with your family member. When I think back on my career, memory care assisted living was pretty new when I began working in the 1980s. In fact, assisted living was a pretty new industry. And I think many of us who worked in the field have been surprised how well assisted living memory care works, because there is this social environment, this therapeutic milieu that really helps. And as we can see this slide here, getting someone out into nature, out into the patio, giving that sense of purpose, it creates this, what I like to call a therapeutic environment, one that is healing. If you Google that phrase again, a therapeutic milieu or therapeutic environment, it means an environment that's healing. And this evokes these old social skills and manners. It's interesting, my mom, when she was living in memory care, she would introduce herself to many of the residents. She would sometimes shake their hands, and she would invite them to have a coffee with her. And she was really like, I think she thought she was living at a hotel, but she would often, engage in a very social manner, because again, company was there. She had to almost kind of perk up and pick up your energy when you have when you're entertaining others. I think sometimes that social skills comes out. It's surprising what residents will also do and ask. They may be open to new experiences and friends. And this is one piece, maybe a little bit off this direct topic of this slide, that I wanted to share with you. If your family member does move into memory care, it can be very tempting to say, now, David, my mom doesn't like this, she doesn't like that, she won't do this, she won't do that. And I found that I had a lot of surprises when my mom moved into memory care. My mother loved the finer things in life and classical music and opera. And one day I walked in and they were doing like, country western line dancing modified with, I think they were watching Hee Haw on television, this old TV show. My mother was having the time of her life. I think sometimes people with dementia forget that they don't do something, and sometimes they're more open. Okay. So what are some of the unique aspects of memory care? What is this kind of product or program about around the US? What is memory care? Well, of course, it's within this continuum of care. We have independent living, where many residents might live in an independent living apartment and come and go and drive and really not have much supervision necessarily from the staff, or may not even need it. We have kind of classical assisted living where people, can again get around their own. But this memory care neighborhood tends to be a very dedicated neighborhood with much more staff training and some specifics. Pardon me, some specifics that I'll talk about now. Safety systems. I'm storing my S's today. Safety systems to reduce the risk of unsafe exit seeking. So we do not have at Era Living or any other place that I think is as sophisticated in the US, we don't have what we call a locked unit. It's a secure neighborhood. So there may be a keypad with a code or a way to at least delay their exit. If they're leaning against the bar, the staff will get a buzzer or have it on their beeper before they actually walk out the door. So these safety systems are important, because people with dementia are at risk for exit seeking and can be very unsafe. So that is one factor about memory care. Also, specialized staff training. If you are looking for memory care, I want you to ask the organization, how do you train your staff? What is your program philosophy? How do you know that the staff working in memory care know what they're doing? Now, of course, we are in an enormous staff shortage around the country right now, but companies I've noticed like Era Living that have a defined program, that treat their people well, that have a good training program where their staff feel the sense of success, I think it's amazing that they can kind of keep their teams together in a much better place. But nevertheless, hopefully you will find a place where staff have had specialized staff training to really understand things like the approach, introducing yourself, smiling, cueing, the kind of ways you use a light touch and finesse to redirect their life story work. There's so many elements of quality dementia care that make an enormous difference that by the way, aren't all that complicated. Also, in this case, in memory care, staff are taught to provide added cues and encouragement for resident activity and engagement. Now, if you're living in independent living, you just might read the calendar in the elevator going up and down and decide which activity you're going to go to. But in memory care, you see, if I know that someone loves golf, I'm going to knock on their door and really encourage them to come and watch a golf tournament on television. If I know someone loves exercise, I'm going to really try hard to get them to that class. I'll knock on the door. I won't take the first no for the answer. George, I know you love this class. We're kind of counting on you. We want you to help lead the class today. Please come. We will miss you if you don't come. And this kind of cueing and encouragement helps get them to activities. And finally, in memory care, I think activities do have a bit of a different flavor. Again, in independent living, if you're doing a painting like you might see here in this picture, that has a beginning, middle, and end. You want to finish the painting that you're doing. But in memory care, you see, again, it's that journey, not the destination. You can stop along the way and talk about colors. What is your favorite color? If you're painting an airplane, you can talk about whether someone worked at Boeing or whether people love to travel and where they've traveled. So again, we can kind of zigzag along a little bit with activities. If you're taking a walk, you don't have to rush through that walk and just kind of finish it. You can stop along the way and smile, look at the sunshine, talk about fresh air, look at the beautiful mountains, look at the birds, and really make that the key element of this sort of activity. I call it, in the activity books I've written, really doing an activity with engagement instead of just rushing through it. So I've talked a bit about best friends, and I thought I would just do a quick kind of recap about the program and how it ties into contemporary dementia care. Now, again, Era Living's very formally embraced the best friends approach, but hopefully you'll find some elements of this kind of positive life affirming view if you are looking even at other places. But at Era Living, our philosophy is that what a person with dementia really needs is a friend, is a best friend. And so Era Living's program stresses friendship, activity. Friends know each other well. I know which friends of mine would love it if I threw them a surprise party, and I know which friends of mine would never speak to me again. I might know of friends, whether they like spicy food or not so spicy food, or what their favorite color or favorite sport is. Well, in a similar fashion, Era Living does a lot of work to know this person's life story well, so we can cue them and make sure we respect their traditions and preferences. I love Starbucks coffee, and if I ever end up in memory care, I'm hoping that someone will bring me a nice cup of black and bitter Starbucks coffee every morning, maybe in the Starbucks cup, just so I can feel good about that. And of course, in memory care with a best friend, with our best friends, particularly when they're having a bad time of it, we try to show warmth and affection and caring. And this kind of communication with words and heart is very powerful as part of this best friends approach. And then again, the staff and Era Living, I think in the sense of being positive and trying to really focus on strengths and abilities. This is so easy to do, but if you have a family member with dementia, you often are so dragged down and focused on the losses of dementia, and there's so many losses. But I always encourage people to say, well, what does the person still enjoy doing? What are some of the strengths there? And maybe the person is a retired woodworker who's very good with his hands and likes to, he always has been a hobbyist and loves to work with tools and wood. Well, maybe you can't give him a power tool anymore, but maybe you give him a stack of poker chips that have fallen out of the case and have him sort them by color. Maybe you ask him to help you rearrange the shop or organize some drawers with safe things in it. Maybe the maintenance guy asks him to make rounds with him to take a look and inspect the premises. You do things like this to kind of build on people's strengths and things they've enjoyed. And this can be very, very helpful as well. So let me now turn to probably the subject many of you have even tuned in to hear, because this is always a daunting issue. I've had so many phone calls over my career, like, mother needs to move into memory care, but I can't budge her. How do I do it? Okay. Well, I think first of all, just reflecting back on why this is such a problem, remember that the key symptoms of dementia include some things that do work against us when we're trying to make something happen. Poor decision making, inability to process and organize information, poor judgment. And I sometimes say people with dementia, they kind of lose their start button, the ability to initiate something. So even if they want to make a move or do something, it just almost seems insurmountable for them to like get out of the house and do certain things. So we already know that there are some basic problems here, and it's important to empathize and almost walk a mile in the shoe of the person with dementia, because you can begin to understand their experience, and that might hopefully spark some creativity on how you begin making the move. So no single answer. In my books, I've often written that you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's. I think you've met one family, you've met one family. All of us have such different circumstances. I'm an only child, and even though I regretted not having siblings to kind of carry some of the work with me about my mom and dad, at one level, another friend of mine with 5 siblings said, David, you are so lucky, because the family's constantly fighting and no one can agree on anything. So again, everyone's a bit different. There's no single answer. But if you are approaching your family member about a move to memory care, I think really the modern approach, the kind of life affirming, sensitive, ethical approach to me is at least to start with the truth. Talk to your family member about what's going on with them, share your concerns, introduce the idea. Don't argue, don't over explain, don't put together a PowerPoint for your family member. Keep it simple and see how it goes. Okay. Now, again, you might very well get an angry or defensive remarks or approach at first, but that's okay. At least you kind of tried to begin this subject matter. And of course, sometimes you can also use other experts. So maybe in this case, you want to get a letter from the doctor, okay? And the doctor says, I've evaluated Muriel Smith, and it's my belief that Muriel is really no longer safe living at home, and she needs to have this kind of residential care program. And so sometimes when you have the support of the doctor, it helps you not become the bad guy, but instead you can say, Mother, I know this is not something you want, but we really need to follow the doctor's orders. He's recommending it. I think it is a good idea for you to consider making this move, and we'll see how it goes, right? And so these are things you can do to kind of, again, kind of build up your toolkit of things to say to the family member. Now, this 5th bullet is something I've actually had quite a bit of success with. If you are really stuck with a tough grandmother or family member who's very, very prideful and doesn't want to leave their house, which we understand, most people don't want to leave their house. Sometimes you just need to get your ducks in a row and wait for that inevitable emergency or healthcare crisis before making the move. So I'll tell you a true story about my own family. Again, only child, I had a good relationship with my mom and dad. Early on in my mother's Alzheimer's, I wanted them to get some in-home help. And of course, their response was, we don't want anybody in the house. We don't need that. We're doing fine. It's too expensive. Well, I did some sleuthing, and I found one lady in the neighborhood named Rosita, who came highly recommended, who did some work for elders and kind of lined things up. So I kind of knew that she'd be available at some point, right? Well, my mother took a fall, broke her left wrist, and went to the hospital. Okay. Nothing too calamitous, but nevertheless a problem. Well, I called Rosita. We got the caregiver lined up. And I said to my mom and dad, hey, no worries. Hey, I'm glad you're home, Mom. And guess what? I've arranged for some in-home help the next few weeks. So you don't have to lift a finger and all will be good. Now, they were upset with me and they asked me to cancel it. I said, Mom and Dad, I've already paid her for a couple of weeks. I don't think I can get my money back. So Rosita started. And of course, after a few days, they loved Rosita. She ended up working with my family for over 10 years. And actually, it really worked very well. Sometimes as a caregiver, it's easier to get forgiveness than permission, okay? So again, develop your game plan, be it a day center, in-home help, assisted living. Figure out what you want to do, because you have this narrow window of opportunity when your mother's in the ER or there's been a bit of a flood or something like that. you want to strike and make that move or get that in-home help or do what you need to do, because you may not have that opportunity as easily again. And finally, staff at Era Living or the Alzheimer's Association can certainly help you learn some best practices about making this kind of transition. And as I said earlier, surprisingly, the transition is almost always successful. So again, the neighborhood or the community will do that individualized assessment, and they'll have a good discussion with you. If for some reason they feel it isn't going to work out, they'll let you know, or if they have concerns, they'll let you know. But again, even someone with some challenging, difficult, ornery behavior with their family, sometimes with the skill of a best friends program, the skill of Era Living, or a really good assisted living community, they can actually, again, work on those behaviors. And sometimes those tough ones end up being the most successful residents. It's quite extraordinary. Now, there's no doubt, I don't want to gloss over it in this format of me kind of racing through some slides, that this is really a wrenching decision, okay? And guilt can be so common. I promised my mother she could stay at home, okay? Well, here's my thought about this. I believe from an ethical point of view, I was on the national ethics panel of the US Alzheimer's Association a number of years ago for about, I think, a year or two. And, from an ethical perspective, if we are doing something and it is in your family member's best interest, I think we're forgiven for maybe breaking a promise or changing the plans, okay? And one way of thinking about this is something called substituted judgment, okay? So let's say your mother is living at home, it's not safe, the family's a wreck about it. She's giving money to an unscrupulous neighbor. She's not eating well. She's walking around the neighborhood disheveled. Okay. Now, you'd promised her she could stay at home, right? But using the concept of substituted judgment, you can say to yourself, what would my mother have wanted me to do if I could have talked to her about this 20 years ago? If I could have, asked her, what would she have wanted? And of course, the odds are your mother would have said, hey, don't let this happen. Protect the family assets. I worked awfully hard for the money. I don't want to squander it. I'd be mortified. I was running around town with no teeth and in a disheveled, dirty, outfit. I'd be really sad if the whole family was just in disarray because of their angst over my decisions. I would want you to do something about it. So again, this can be helpful in a very positive way. We all want to honor our parents, be supportive as well. But remember, again, if you have a parent with dementia, their judgment is suffering, and you can't necessarily be in the same relationship you've always been. Often now you have to help lead and make that important decision for them. So some other common caregiver concerns, and maybe we can have some discussion about this in the wrap up section here in the last. I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. But people are afraid. Will my parents or family member be angry at me? Will they forgive me? Well, I think it's probably very likely that many people will be angry at their kids for making the placement, right? Nothing was wrong with me. They acted in their own interest, or I didn't need to make this move. But what happens, you see, is I think people with dementia, particularly, I do think many of them are somewhat self-aware. Many of them probably have been struggling being at home. They've been stressed about navigating chores and cooking, or maybe they see the garden is all brown when they used to take such pride in the garden. And I think what happens is they get very prideful, but at the same time, when they get into this environment where suddenly they have 3 good meals a day, an affectionate staff, activities, engagement, they have a lovely surrounding, they can take a bus trip once a week. I think what happens is they actually learn to enjoy it. And so I think forgiveness will follow. Okay, will he rapidly decline in memory care? Well, again, I've had caregivers say, oh, I made the placement and they just fell apart. Well, it's possible, because we know that change can be difficult for people with memory loss. But this is a progressive illness, and that kind of decline can happen even if they stayed at home. We're also so anxious about worrying about, how they'll do. We may be looking at them through a different prism. So certainly someone can go into decline with memory care, but oddly enough, I often see the opposite. They do better. Think about even just the dietary component, malnutrition. When people eat well and drink more, they actually do better. Blood sugar, we know that out of control diabetes, high blood sugar is really an enemy of the brain. And so if your mother moves into an assisted living building where they can monitor her diet, maybe get her insulin straightened out if she even needs it, get her off the carbs and sugar and sweets, actually when the blood sugar comes under control, often cognition gets better. Okay, it often gets better. So again, I don't think it's true that someone will necessarily rapidly decline. Now, I've talked in some past era living webinars about depression. 40% of people who have Alzheimer's disease, according to the Alzheimer's Association, will experience bouts of depression during their illness. So be aware of this. And if someone is depressed, of course, the depression might have been started many years before they moved into memory care. But if they are depressed, if we think it is triggered by this move, this upset, we can treat it with kindness, friendship, activity, pet therapy, intergenerational activities, as well as the antidepressant meds. And is the familiar setting of home better? Well, again, probably. People being at home can be more routine, more structured. But at the same time, I think people also begin to forget exactly where they are. They do have confusion of time and place. And often when they move into memory care, this new surroundings, the new environment is pleasant, it's pleasing, it has a homey feel. And I think that can also be a really good thing for people with dementia. If you find a place that, again, evokes these feelings of homes, we know it isn't home, but it can be as homey as possible with good friendship and good food and nice surroundings as well, including, of course, time outdoors. Now, when should you make the move? Again, no magic formula, but I guess if I could encourage you on any one thing, I just talked to actually a family in England, of all places, in London, and they've waited so long to place the husband that really many places won't even take him because his behaviors are so challenged. He's lost a lot of his mobility. And of course, his wife, who I think really has done her best, did not have the skill to keep them as fully engaged as possible. So I like to say to families, do consider a move early or earlier in the Alzheimer's experience, because then the person can move into memory care and actually enjoy the camaraderie, the activities, the engagement. We've had people move into assisted living who think they work there, or people who we put in charge of a certain project. And so again, just a food for thought there. I don't know that I have an exact date to tell you, but don't wait until the person maybe can just be there a few short months. Okay, I think we've covered some of this, but let me just maybe expand on this a little bit with making the move. Again, plain talk, keep it simple. I'm a fan of scripting family members. You don't want to have a meeting with mother or your father, maybe your father, to talk about mother and come in unprepared. So perhaps kind of give people a little script about who's going to make what point. I think holding a family meeting, it may seem a bit dramatic, but I think it can be a good thing to do, and say, hey, mom and dad, we need to make some decisions. This is what isn't really working now, and we want to be part of the solution, and let's work together as a family and make something happen. Again, get the letter from the doctor, involve a friend or a trusted family advisor. I had a dear friend in Santa Barbara who kind of always pushed back with her kids for a variety of reasons. And when it came time to get her some more help, the children asked me if I would talk to my friend about it. Pardon me. And I did, and I felt good about it because I felt the same way. And the fact that a friend or maybe a rabbi, a clergy member, the doctor, the family lawyer, someone who is sort of a confidant to the family, the fact that they're sometimes bringing this message can, I think, sort of take away some of the parent-child dynamic that can interfere sometimes. And again, use less logic and more emotion. Mom, it frightens me when you're at home. I don't sleep at night. I'm so worried about you. I think this new home will be so much fun. You're going to make new friends. You're going to be happy. And I'm so happy when you're happy, something to that versus let me tell you the 10 reasons why you need to move into memory care. And again, people with dementia respond to emotion much more than they do to words and logic. After the move, if you are visiting, short visits are okay. Don't feel like you have to spend hours there. Sometimes with my mom, I would spend an hour. Other times I would say, Mom, I'm on my way to an appointment. I wanted to pop in and say hello. Greet your family member with a smile or show of emotion. Gently introduce yourself if needed. Mom, it's David, your son. I'm so glad to be with you. I know who you are. Well, sometimes, there's a problem there. And again, I almost like to say, kind of put on a little bit of that Academy Award-winning performance, notch it up a little bit, show enthusiasm. At least with many family members, they kind of get tickled about that. They enjoy it. Again, that emotional communication really survives much longer than sometimes the language does. I bring a gift or small treat. Spend time outside, get some natural vitamin D. I know that in Seattle that isn't always possible, but I'm a big fan of going outdoors. It's sensory, it's spiritual. Ask the staff to set you up on the patio with some lemonade. Bring a little project to work on. instead of bringing in a flower arrangement, bring in some individual flowers and arrange them with your mother. Put them in the vase. Now, Mom, do you like the red one next or the white one? Is that a rose or a tulip, Mom? I forget. And enjoy this kind of camaraderie of doing the flower arrangement together. Keep some wrapping paper in the room and say, Mother, you're so good at this. Would you help me wrap some presents? My secretary's having a birthday, and maybe bring a book in and pick out the papers and the colored ribbons, have her put her finger down, and do something like that. Go through old photo albums, scrapbooks. Now, again, you're not saying, now, Mother, do you remember who this is? You might say, oh, look, here's Aunt Hetty. Isn't she something? Look at the funny hat she's wearing. Provide lots of cues and clues. Maybe you have a grandchild or a child who's having a significant birthday. Bring in a catalog, pick out something. Your niece is having her 16th birthday. Would you help me pick out just the right sweater for her in the Nordstrom's catalog? Write some birthday cards, holiday cards together, things like that. And of course, always share with staff your family members' unique history, interests, and achievements. I want you to be sure, even though we have at Era Living certain documents about life story, share stories. Make sure that you really talk to the staff about your family member. If the person is angry or confused after the move, employ empathy and understanding. I think many of us would feel the same way. It's okay to apologize, but stress that this is the best option to keep your family members safe and engaged. Again, most of the time, the person begins to enjoy their new friends and home. And that family script I've dwelled on a few times during this webinar. My favorite of all time was a family who told me that they would tell her mother when she wants to go home, Mom, the doctor wants you to be here for now. You need to build your strength. One of my most, I just love that approach, because what's great is it's easy for the person with dementia to understand. Plus, it's not a lie, because almost everybody with dementia, almost every elder does need to build their strength, and the doctor wants the person to be there often. So the caregiving journey, you will find that the senior living community is resource rich and may offer support groups and caring staff that can help. I found it was interesting. My father kind of buddied up with some of the other family members when my mom lived in memory care for 3 years. Enjoy meeting these other family members who've shared common experiences. Enjoy meals or time outdoors with your family member. Okay. The caregiving journey, here is Era Living, sort of top 10 things about me forum. If you are moving into Era Living or another building, be sure that you cooperate with their efforts to get this bio information. We really want to know a lot about the person moving in. Again, if you have concerns, ask the staff for a care plan meeting or family meeting. Be sure to complete that life story information. And of course, I am a fan of support groups that will help you go through some of your own grieving, also be a good source of resources and education. And I believe the Alzheimer's Association all around the country is not only rekindling or restarting their in-person support groups, but also still does the virtual support groups as well. So thank you very much. I hope I've given you some good ideas today. Just a little heads up again that if you do need to reach me, I'm at davidtroxel@gmail.com. I'm always happy to answer your questions or set up a phone call with you. If any of you are on Facebook, I have a professional Facebook page. You can actually like something called Best Friends Approach, to sort of type it into that search engine on your phone or your laptop and hit like, and you get lots of announcements of conferences and interesting articles. And then I'm on LinkedIn at David Troxel. Here are the books that I've written on dementia, and I think Era Living actually has some copies of A Dignified Life. that perhaps you can pick up at their buildings, or at least borrow. This is my family book with Virginia Bell. And again, you can read more about that on my website as well. They're all on Amazon and Kindle and all that, with activity books and staff training books. And what I'll do now is, again, say my formal goodbye for the formal part of the presentation, turn it back over to Joan to wrap up this part, and then we'll look forward to having some discussion. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. We really appreciate your time. And I've been in the industry for about 13 years, and I've learned a lot of new information today, too. So thank you. You can never learn enough new information, I think. So I think at this time, we're just going to pause for a minute. If you would prefer to ask questions using our chat feature, if you're familiar with that, you can go ahead and start typing your questions in there now, and then I'll read those questions to David. Or if you do not have that ability and you would prefer, we can try to take our microphones off mute actually at this time. Sometimes that actually works a little bit better. So we can go ahead and try that and see how that goes. And you can ask your question directly to David that way. So I'm going to pause for just a minute to see what questions pop up in chat, and also to see if you'd like to unmute your mic to ask David a question.
Thank you, Joan. And I think a quick tip is you can hit your space bar, hold that down, and it will turn your microphone, it will turn your turn your microphone back on.
Good feedback. That's a tip I didn't realize. Okay. As we wait for some questions to come in, there is a question on chat about, can we get a copy of this presentation? And yes, we are recording it, so we'll be happy to send that out. Thank you. That was a good question. Okay, I'm going to see, is anyone having any trouble unmuting their microphone that's on video right now? So you can raise your hand. We'll see if we can figure out how to troubleshoot that for you. And
I'd invite you to share any stories you have if you've moved a family member to memory care, or how things that you found were helpful.
Okay, we do have some questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and start reading those questions. The first one is more of a comment maybe that you can address. So a family member who recently has decided they don't need to bathe, and they get very upset when the topic is brought up.
You know, it is so tough, the issue around bathing, and there aren't some easy answers. One thing I would say is, try to be clever about kind of how you present it. Maybe instead of saying you need to take a shower, that, maybe the spa is ready or the spa tub is ready. There are, I think nowadays, some really good products about these wipes and kind of even sponge bath type products that you can use that will help. Again, maybe blame it on the doctor. Mom, I know you don't really want to take the shower, but the doctor insists you have the shower 2 times a week, Sometimes if you can sort of set the stage for success, maybe put on some of their favorite music, Louis Armstrong, Nat King Cole, talk a bit about their past, kind of put the person before the task for a few minutes and just kind of chit chat and visit. That can relax them and turn that no into a yes. There is a good resource called Bathing Without a Battle by a woman who's actually, I think, in the Portland area, Joanne Rader. Bathing Without a Battle, that might be helpful. The Alzheimer Association also has some sheets about that as well. But, again, it can be fear. It can be a fear of falling. They may not understand what's happening to them. But do your best. Often you can somehow get them into that shower eventually, but it is really tough. A shower chair can certainly be very helpful. Some of the devices there. Be all set to go, have the shower running, have all your supplies ready, and that can be as well very helpful. But don't ever force somebody or push somebody to do something that they just refuse to do, but keep trying, and often you might discover, maybe you sing to her and you sing your way into the shower, things like that.
Thank you, David. Okay. Before reading the next question, I'll just pause for a second in case anyone has unmuted their mic and would like to ask a question. Okay, I'll continue on. So the next question is regarding the letter from the physician. What would you recommend that the physician include in that letter to convince everyone to agree?
Yes, well, a couple thoughts. One is, certainly I hope you have a physician who's on your side and supports the safety of your family member. I'll maybe add one more name to that, that there are these new professionals called geriatric care managers who are typically nurses or social workers. You can hire them to come in and do an assessment. They're very good. They kind of are great at identifying resources, and they can write a letter. But basically, you want the letter to be 1 page or less. Keep it simple. It's my recommendation that because you have memory loss, because you have Alzheimer's disease or other dementia, we believe it's unsafe for you to live by yourself or unsafe for you to be home. I'm recommending that you move to residential care where you can be safe and have a more structured activity or something to that effect. Now, again, is that going to work completely? Of course not. That your family member might even deny ever having gone to that doctor, but at least that gives you a bit more of a tool as well.
Okay, great.
And just a quick tip, sorry, Joan. I mean, honestly, I've had family members almost write the letter for the doctor or send him or her some bullet points. So don't just say, would you write me a letter? I would actually send them some bullet points to really stress. And of course, they may or may not completely agree with all of those, but hopefully they will.
Perfect, thank you. Next question, this one does seem like it's kind of a tricky one. How do you prevent a parent from ordering healthcare items that they've seen advertised on TV? That's tough.
Wow, yeah, or any item for that matter, yeah. If there's a way to, if there's a way to take away the credit card, or, maybe say to mom, hey, whenever you want something, let me know and I'll order it for you, so you can have a bit of that screen. I think those can be ideas there. If there's a way to modify the television viewing to watch other channels, or maybe you can program it to have more cable programs without the local advertising. But no, it's very tough. They also might order the same thing. I've had people order 5 toasters from Amazon, or, we even had a person buy 2 new cars, which is really a disaster. And, things like that. But yeah, they lose their judgment, their impulse control, they're forgetful. So I think if you can change the TV viewing itself, change the credit card, you might have more luck kind of being upstream on some of those ideas, because if they're still watching those ads and have access to their own money, the odds are it's going to be tough to do, I guess, get good at those returns, right? Hit the Amazon return label and print it and mail it back. By the way, if someone lives at home, and I feel this, I've had people say maybe this is not appropriate, but if you can, maybe change the mail to your address, so there you can screen the mail, or figure out some way to screen the mail. I think USPS also has now this service where you can see what mail is going to come to you every day, and maybe you can get on that for your mom. So if you see a bunch of bogus charity things going on, you can jump in.
Perfect. Okay, this is describing a situation and then asking for your advice. And in this scenario, it is such that it's a couple. The person with dementia, they feel, would probably be open to move, but it's actually the spouse who does not have dementia, does not want things to change, and does not want their spouse to move into memory care. And he gets very frustrated when the family brings up this subject matter. Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. Okay, well, let me maybe attack that question this way about kind of, Joan, what I would not do, okay? So I would not constantly bring it up. I would not kind of nag your family member. I would not, push really hard, because the more you push, the more they'll push back, right? So, mark your calendar a couple times a month to bring it up, or share some stories, things like that as well. This might be a case where the doctor's letter might help. You could also, if the doctor would order it, do a neuropsychological exam, arrange a neuropsych eval, where basically the doctor sits with the person and asks them a bunch of questions and writes a whole report about what they can and can't do. So again, try to give yourself a bit more tools that way. I think just kind of broadening out the discussion here. One thing I would recommend is, as you talk to your father, for example, about this, maybe your mother needs memory care and he won't let her go. Don't focus so much on him, focus on her. So if you're saying, now, Dad, you're not well, you're going to fall apart, you're not sleeping, you're not eating well, you're going to you're going to collapse if we don't, get mom to memory care. Sometimes, and it's strange, I've actually found that it sort of hardens their resolve. It hardens if you focus exclusively on them. So I would have a lighter touch, Dad, I think this would be best for mother, and this is the reason why. It will give her, a staff to take care of her. We'll get her personal care done better. She'll eat well. You can come and enjoy some fun with her. You can come and enjoy a good time with her. You can visit with her. And so sometimes that can be a better piece. Again, if your father is just not going to allow it, maybe that's where you again kind of wait for that emergency that will inevitably come, and kind of get your own plans in a row, and then you could perhaps get that move done initially. Sometimes someone like him will also go for a respite or 2-week stay just to see how it goes. If you are completely out of luck, okay, one family I talked to, I think it's the stepfather who won't allow things for the mother, and of course it's their biological mother. Again, in our U.S. system, unless there's abuse, the spouse is in charge, right? So I finally said to the daughters, go visit, focus on fun, take your mom out for ice cream, take her for walks, enjoy time with your mother, because there's no use banging your head on the wall over and over again if the stepfather won't do it. But if you rebuild that relationship with your mom and him, and if he views you as an ally, that can also help.
That's great. Thank you. And a comment to please discuss how to be helpful with someone experiencing dementia and clinical depression.
Yeah, as I said earlier, depression is kind of a fellow traveler with dementia. I think it's important to address it. I mean, I think you can, I'm sure, Google some articles about it, but basically, how do we deal with depression? Well, we change the environment. We add activity, purpose, engagement, music, art, exercise, time outdoors, that natural sunshine. So I think that's very powerful. And then talk to your doctor. The antidepressant medications in elders are actually pretty decent. They don't have heavy side effects, and they can also be impactful.
The next question, this is our last question at this time, might be one that I might be able to touch on a little bit, because the question is, how much memory care can you get in assisted living, and under what condition must one go into memory care for assisted living? If you have other comments on that, David, I welcome you to address it too, but I think what I'll touch on there is simply that answer would actually depend a little bit depending on the community that you are looking at. Communities are designed differently with what they can or can't do in assisted living, and it also depends on the timing in which someone has moved in and how much they've adjusted, how much pathfinding, so to speak, they've developed while they've already been living in assisted living to kind of keep them on the familiar paths that they've had along the way. So it certainly would come down to safety issues in all situations. Is there exit-seeking behavior where the assisted environment is not secured enough to protect them, and is there risk of one leaving the community and being unprotected? Then certainly that might warrant time to be in the more secured setting, as David had described. It's not locked, as he shared, but secured to keep one safe. And I'd say the other piece, when I'm asked that question, would be dignity too. So safety and dignity. Is someone still able to connect, and in a way, is their dignity protected, or are they starting to develop behaviors in the assisted side of the community that doesn't allow them to continue to have the same relationships or friendships? Are they dressing inappropriately? Are they coming out with soiled clothing? Are they struggling with bathing and assistance to the point where they need to have more support and supervision? Again, that can be addressed more specifically with any of the communities that you're looking at to walk you through, because it would be different in each one. But David, do you have other comments you'd like to add?
I think you did an excellent job. No, good job, Joan.
Okay, okay, thanks. Let's see, we're at 3:01, so maybe what we'll do is touch on one last question here, which actually circles back to the very beginning about the Alzheimer's drug, and wondering if you would like to
See, I needed my own memory prompt on that. Yeah, I'm sure many of you have read, I'll keep it real short and sweet, that the new Biogen drug, aducanumab, or Aduhelm, has been approved by the FDA. It's controversial. There are many docs and researchers who feel that it should not have been approved. Originally, they approved it for all the stages of Alzheimer's. That created another furor. And so now the FDA has only approved it for people with very early stage Alzheimer's. Okay. The drug basically attacks the amyloid in your brain. We hope strips it out, hopefully maybe reduces your dementia. But the problem is the drug has a lot of side effects, brain bleeds and other kinds of things. It's an infusion that you have to do, I think, on a monthly basis for maybe a year. Taking someone to an infusion center for an hour, you need to have at least 3 MRI scans, before, middle, and the end. It's a big, big deal to get this drug administered. Plus, they're going to price it at $56,000 a year, and many people will have an $8,000 to $10,000 copay. So basically, bottom line is there are people who believe this drug doesn't work very well, if at all. If it does have impact, which of course many people are hopeful that there will be some answers out there. If your family member is very early stage, talk to your doctor. I'm not a physician, but there may be people indeed who benefit from this drug that gives them a number more months of better cognition in theory. I think the good news here is thanks to the great work of the Alzheimer's Association, our research budget is now over $3 billion a year. And the fact that we've finally gotten a drug over the finish line means to me that the pharma companies will be reinvesting. And I'm hopeful that we have many more better drugs to come. But I guess that's my take on aducanumab or Aduhelm, that significant side effects, a real burden to administer, and probably only helpful a little bit for some people in the early stages.
Thank you. Thank you for covering that, David. And thanks again for being here today. And we look forward to more conversations with you in the next coming sessions that we have coming up. August 4th will be the next topic where we're going to learn a lot more details about the best friends approach to dementia care. So we hope that you're able to join us then. In the meantime, following this, we're going to be emailing everybody an evaluation form, and please take the time to fill that out for us to give us feedback not only on this presentation, but perhaps to offer suggestions about future presentations as well. If you do have specific questions regarding any of our Era Living communities, you're welcome to call the one of interest, but again, specifically for information about the memory care programs that we offer, please contact either the Gardens at Town Square and speak to anyone in our community relations team here, or at Ida Culver House Broadview, and we'll be most happy to help. So thanks once again, everyone, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you hopefully on August 4th. So have a wonderful day, and thanks again, David.